Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Million Dollar Failure, Why Homes Don't Sell, and How to Fix It. These are real stories, real fails, and real solutions. And now, here are your hosts, Jeremy and Nicole.
So welcome back. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Jeremy Silber.
Oh my gosh. How has your week been?
It's been very hectic.
All the buyers just showed up.
They did. It's very bizarre that in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, calls out of the blue from people I haven't spoken to in about a year and a half, 2 years.
Yes.
And they were quick to move to get under contract.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Several of our listings had showings who hadn't had a lot of action.
Yes.
Possible threats of offers.
Yes.
I had a condo go under contract.
Yes.
But it just got busy and everyone had the same thing. I don't know what happened in the buyer's psyche this last weekend.
Yeah.
Something made them feel better. They showed up.
Maybe they got their tax returns. I don't know. Their checks showed up, maybe. I don't know. But it is weird how, with everything that has been happening politically, economically, that you wouldn't guess it would have been the time for this to happen.
No.
But it did.
The beginning of May is not necessarily the normal one. The season, like in Vero, has ended, but that's been extended because of bad weather up north, apparently. So maybe that brought some of the Vero buyers out. I don't know. But they were here too in Melbourne and in the Melbourne area.
Yeah. And what's interesting is all you have to do is read the news and you will see that we deal with a lot of sellers. And from that perspective, right, prices have been falling. We've seen for the first time the data actually showed it in the first quarter and for March year over year, at least in the Space Coast, right? There's been a drop in average sales price.
Right.
So it's good news that this occurred, right? That we weren't expecting it, but it happened. And so that's good news.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. There's predictions by everyone. I don't even care. I don't. And then the news doesn't help anything. Maybe the news did a good story for once. Maybe that's why they showed up.
Right. But also it could be that people are finding, since more homes are on the market than they have been in a long time, prices have been dropping to try and get some sales.
Right.
And maybe, people watch Zillow, people watch Realtor.com, they have their notifications on. And it could be that, wow, I'm ready to jump into the water at where these homes are priced.
Right. I'm finally ready.
Yeah.
So today we're going to have Jordan Lulich on, a local attorney.
He's awesome.
He's fantastic. He does real estate, estate planning, and I'm sure other aspects in the legal realm. But those are what we usually lean on him for. And he's helped out a lot. His company also will close transactions. They're closing agents too. And that's great because so we've got a lot of sellers or buyers or people from up north, and up north a lot of the times they have to close an attorney's office. So when they come here, they're a little weirded out by what is this title company?
Just a title company. Right?
Where's the attorney?
Right.
So in those instances, he is a great option.
Right. So can't wait to talk to him and find out what he has to tell us.
Pick his brains, hear his stories.
Yes.
All right. So we are here with Jordan Lulich. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nicole, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
I've known Jordan since I started real estate also. He has been a go-to for any type of legal advice involving real estate and sometimes personal.
Yeah, I've reached out to Jordan on different issues here and there. He's been very helpful. He's a very respected real estate attorney, and more than just that, right? So it's a good segue into Jordan. Tell us about yourself and what do you do within the real estate world and the legal aspects of things?
Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with both of you over the years. So I am a board certified real estate attorney. My practices include helping buyers, sellers, lenders, realtors, real estate brokerages, basically stay out of trouble. That's my job, is I want to make sure that you stay out of court, you don't have legal problems, and you can focus on living your best life and not having to worry about lawyers and lawsuits and problems. So in a nutshell, that's what I do. We've got our firm, Lulich and Attorneys, which I own. We've got an office in Vero Beach, an office in Sebastian, and we work with people all throughout the state of Florida for anything concerning Florida.
Very cool. And where are you from? Where did you grow up? Why Sebastian?
am a Florida cracker. So I'm one of the few who, like, growing up in Indian River County, you think it's God's waiting place for something bigger and better. Can't wait to get the heck out of Florida, or at least out of this area. So born and raised in Sebastian Vero Beach area, went to Florida State University. And once you move away, you're like, wow, like this area, this Treasure Coast, Space Coast area that we live in, it's special. Like we've got the river, we've got fishing, the islands, the beach, and you don't have that in Tallahassee.
No.
So I missed it dearly, and then decided to move back and thought it was a great place to live, to enjoy, and it's quiet, and it's everything that is what I look for in raising a family as well. So
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before you joined, we were discussing a little bit about the condo market and all of the, I don't know, just problems or difficulties we're seeing. You know, we're seeing a lot of condos sitting on the market. Some complexes seem to be, you know, their prices seem to be trending downward.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Condos are a tough situation right now for our sellers. One of the points I was bringing up is the new condo rider that was released, I guess, more than a few months ago now.
Right.
But it is very detailed oriented, and we've run into situations where there might be some things left out. There might be some things within the minutes of the past couple months that reveal discussion of possible assessments. And so maybe it's a good point to start there.
Right.
What you're seeing within the condo market and how it affects sellers and these documents and disclosures and sort of like a whole potpourri.
Yeah. Freaking the buyers out.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're seeing it across the board, right? I mean, every person I talk to involved in real estate, I think the general consensus is the condo market is difficult. It's tough to sell a condo. And if you're a buyer, you can buy a condo, but make sure you know what you're doing if you're going to buy a condo. So why is that the case? Because it wasn't like that 5 years ago, right? I mean, from your perspective in sales, did you guys see this 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Oh no, they were easy to sell. They were
Yeah.
great.
Right.
Yeah, you could have this place on the beach, 500, 600,000, it was an easy sell. So what happened was in 21, everybody probably remembers there was a collapse of the Surfside building down in South Florida. And that collapse, the building just like suddenly collapsed. It was a very old building, and that collapse killed 98 people. It was devastating. And people were super just caught off guard. They were surprised. They didn't know why the building collapsed. They didn't know what happened. And once people started to look into it, became pretty evident that the problem was that the building wasn't properly taken care of. It was an older building. It was, super high building. I don't know how many stories, 20 stories. And the state of Florida was put kind of in a tough spot. They were almost pushed in a corner because everybody started to realize that the state of Florida in 2021 had no safety laws in place. There was no requirements to have any ongoing maintenance or reserves. And in fact, what people were doing back then were these condo associations. What they're made up is a board of people. So you've got your president, your secretary, your treasurer, and the board would meet, and then they would receive a complaint about an elevator, or they would receive complaints about the balcony. Maybe there's a balcony and it's kind of loose, or they would receive these complaints, and the decision would have to be made. Do we repair it? Do we just ignore it? Or do we completely put in a new elevator or whatever the maintenance or repair problem is? Or do we completely, fix the problem? And 9 out of 10 times, what the condos associations decided is because there was no requirements and there was no laws in place,
Right.
they decided, we don't want to come out of pocket.
No,
We don't want to pay money.
Yep.
Exactly. A lot of our condos are filled with retirees on fixed budgets. They can't have another bill or an assessment.
Yeah.
That's what they were thinking at the time.
So how does this kicking down the road of these things that needed to be repaired, what did that lead to?
Yeah, so the state of Florida looked at it, and they realized that there's 25,000 residential condo associations. 25,000. So this is a pretty widespread problem. And the state scrambled together and they passed a condo law in 2022 that had some basic safety laws. And then they actually updated it in 2023, which, to try to like put it in as layman terms as possible, basically said that an engineer has to go out to these condo associations, has to do an inspection, and then there has to be some type of reserve that's created based upon how old the different parts of the condo buildings are.
Right.
And what that meant is there's stories down in South Florida where it meant in order to get the reserves where they needed to be, that some of these unit owners had to come out of pocket $100,000 in assessments.
Oh, absolutely. I think.
Can you imagine?
No. And the largest one I've seen was a seller in Vero Beach, and it was $86,000.
Wow. Right here in Vero.
Right there.
Wow.
On the ocean. They needed a new parking garage. They needed, the structure redone. They needed the elevators done, the pier done, literally everything.
And Jeremy hit it on the head before. I mean, Jeremy, you said that these people are on fixed income. Like, you're on fixed income, you're not going to have $86,000 of disposable cash to be able to pay the assessment.
No. So on top of the reserves that have to be built up, and correct me, I'm wrong, this is the year that has to happen. Like, this is the deadline by the state for all these condos. Is that correct? Is it 2025?
The last deadline is December of 2025.
Okay.
And so what we're seeing is, because of these strong reserve laws, we're seeing the unit owners not able to pay. And these condo associations are starting to be dismantled, and developers are coming in and actually purchasing the entire condo buildings to get the condos up to speed to where they need to be. So the state of Florida was pretty receptive to the feedback around the state. And so there's actually right now, where it's May 2025, there's a bill in front of Governor DeSantis' desk. And what it says, in the most simplest terms, it does a lot, but the most important part, in my opinion, is basically condo associations can forego the requirement of having a reserve, meaning unit owners don't have to pay all these special assessments if there's some type of line of credit from a bank that they can draw on to pay for the problems as they come up. And so that's, I think it's like, how do you balance, the safety with also not kicking people out of these homes? And, it hopefully that's going to be the solution to the condo market and the decreased sales and the marketability, as you guys were talking about before.
So if you're a buyer or a seller, let's put it in the seller terms. If you're a seller and you want to make your condo as attractive as possible to sell, and we always put documents inside the listing for them to see, what would you recommend? Like, we've always heard, hey, you need all the minutes from the past X amount of months. Like, what do you recommend as that document package up front for buyers to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the most recent problems I've been seeing is that there is a failure to disclose when people are trying to sell a condo. And if you think about it, we're in Florida, we're in Space Coast, Treasure Coast, right? We have a lot of seasonal residents. So a lot of people could only be using the condos for part of the year. And these condos, they meet, there's board meetings, maybe monthly, quarterly. So if you've got someone up north who's part of the association, they're not going to go to these association meetings just because they're not physically present.
Right.
And what the contract says when you go to sell a condo is, if there's any mention of a special assessment in any of the meetings or any of the agendas in the last 12 months from when the contract signed, you've got to disclose it as a seller. And so what I'm seeing from a transaction perspective, I'm seeing the seller not disclosing this a lot of times just because the seller doesn't know, because the seller's up north. So Jeremy, you made a good point. If you can go back and if you can look at those last 12 months of minutes, agendas, if you're a realtor, if you're a seller, certainly if you're a buyer, but the more people can go look through those meetings and agendas, and they're not long. I mean, we're not talking about 200 pages of documents.
They're very short.
Yeah.
You guys have seen them, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so there's a definite distinction between rumors and what's in those minutes.
Absolutely.
Rumors mean nothing. So if I'm a condo owner and I heard, oh, Joey says there's going to be an assessment next year.
Oh, Joey.
Oh, Joey. I don't know how I came up with that name, Joey. That's great.
It's always a Joey.
It's a Joey. But
Kevin's the Aaron of men.
Kevin, that's funny. Rumors don't need to be revealed. They don't need to be disclosed, right? It's only the written word, correct?
Just send the minutes and let the minutes speak for you.
Yeah. So if it's not disclosed in the minutes, if it's chat by the poolside over some margaritas a Friday afternoon, like that doesn't count as far as what the contract's looking to be disclosed. The other thing is, because of these new laws, we talked about how an engineer has to go out and they have to do a study, which we call it a structural integrity reserve study. It's got this long name. We call it a SIRS study for short. So they go out and they do this SIRS study. And that's also something that's really good to look at. Now, if you're a buyer, you may not understand it. So you may need someone like Jeremy, Nicole, or myself as an attorney to look at it for you. But you want to see, hey, does the association need a new roof in 2 years? And I've seen buyers try to negotiate the price for condos because a new roof on the condo association is going to be needed in 10 years or 15 years. And you think that's crazy. You're like, I buy a house, and because I need a new roof on my house, I can negotiate the price because I need a new roof in 10 years. I mean, that typically doesn't take place.
That's crazy.
But they're using that, and I've seen that as an effective way to try to negotiate the price. Because in the foreseeable future, some of these aspects of the condo buildings are going to need to be replaced, and they know that because of this SIRS study. It's also just something that's required to be disclosed in the contract writer as well.
What's interesting, I guess, if you're representing a buyer, the buyer has that information, and you're savvy enough to look into the financials and see that they have not been putting money aside in the reserves to cover a new roof, then it kind of makes sense that, well, I'll be screwed in 10 years because we haven't been putting the reserves in. So I'm going to get hit up for $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to help put a new roof on. So the more, to your point, if everything gets revealed, and as a seller and then as a buyer, you're able to navigate and learn from that, then you're going to be in a much better spot.
Well, yeah. And the sellers are making deals now on condos. They've been sitting. Yeah. You can negotiate more. Yeah. You actually have a shot to be ridiculous and be like, well, this needs a roof in 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
And so going back to it, I'm seeing these special assessments that I'm seeing them not be disclosed. So what happens then? What happens if you go under contract, you're a seller, you don't know anything that's going on with the association, you don't know anything that's been mentioned in the meeting minutes or the agenda, but there's been some talks that's documented in the meeting minutes and the agenda that there may be a special assessment. Not that a special assessment was passed, just that it was talked about. Well, if you didn't disclose it, then the contract says exactly who pays for it, but the seller is ultimately going to be financially responsible in some way for that failure to disclose.
Interesting.
So in the recent case, it amounted to $100 a month for 10 years, right? So that's $12,000, right? So that's $12,000 is a significant amount of money. But then the question is, all right, how big of a deal are we going to make? And we always, when we talk to a client, we always do a cost benefit analysis, because we're not going to go spend $9,000 fighting a $12,000 bill, but to try to, talk to your agent, have your agent try to go renegotiate it. You could try to send a demand letter, but ultimately, if you've got some type of failure disclosed like this, you've got to go to mediation per the contract. And then it gets costly. You've got a mediator you're paying $400 an hour. You've got an attorney you're paying, so much per hour. The other side has an attorney paying so much an hour. So you're talking about a lot of fees being added up. So you don't want to go fight everything just because an issue resolves. You got to approach it from a cost benefit analysis and, approach it like a business decision. Does it make sense? Is it logical here to go and actually fight this, not just fight for the sake of fighting?
So that's a great transition into one of our other questions here of, say we get to the point a few days before closing, and then either the seller or the buyer decides, you know what, I'm out.
Well, this comes up because I thought we were going to be facing this. I have the transaction from hell, and the buyers at the last minute, we really thought that they were just going to not come to the table and sign. Called Jordan. He's like, we're not there yet. But what happens if a buyer or seller at the last minute, you're under contract and they're just like, psych?
So there's very limited ways to cancel a contract, right? And so it's for a seller, there's like one or two ways in a very, very narrow sense that you can cancel it. It's like maybe happens 1% of the time. But as a buyer, you've got a little bit more flexibility as far as when you can cancel. If you can't get approved for a loan, if you want to do it during your inspection period, if you can't get approved by the association, the contract's built in to provide some protections. But what we're talking about is once we're past all these different ways to cancel, then the buyer decides, oh, I don't want to, I don't like the way that the front lawn is laying out. I want to go find a different property, right? And this happens a lot more than you think.
Oh my God.
First step is if you're the seller, do you want to try to force this buyer to buy the property? And the hard part is you cannot, it's very difficult to try to force a buyer to purchase a property. Very difficult. And the rationale behind it from a court's perspective is it's hard to say, Jeremy, you're under contract. You have to take your money out of your bank account and you have to use it to buy this property.
Right.
Because what happens if you give it away or you transfer it? I mean, then courts are getting into looking at your finances and seeing where it goes. And so as a seller, if you have a buyer that backs out, as a seller, your remedy, your what you can go after, what rights you have is to hold the buyer accountable to that decision. And you do that by trying to demand that they pay you a certain amount for canceling the contract. I've seen a buyer back out before, and the seller in this case was an elderly lady, and she, in reliance of the closing that was coming up, she packed up all of her stuff, got into a moving truck, moved all the way up to, I think it was Maine, all the way up north, spent a very good bill on the moving cost, and then had her purchased a property up there, and then had this property vacant. And like 3 days before closing, the buyer just decides, who was going to pay cash for the property, decides that he didn't want to purchase the property anymore. And it really for no reason, like there was no valid reason. It was just, he decided that he didn't want to do it. And what we did in that case is we sent a demand letter and we said, what you did is against the contract. It violates the term of the contract. And my client, my seller, wants to be made whole. And the buyer puts up a deposit, right? Puts up a deposit for every time they sign a contract. But we said the loss, the damages, the financial challenges that this seller has because of you backing out exceeds the $5,000 or $10,000 that you put in escrow. And we ended up obtaining more than what was in escrow from the buyer because the buyer backed out in that case. And so that's really what the remedy has as a seller, is to hold the buyer accountable and say, hey, you need to pay money. But have you guys ever seen when a seller decides that a seller doesn't want to sell a property?
So I've never had that. And there's only one person in our office who recently had that happen.
And I have not seen that before.
And that happens too. I think it was a little bit more common like 3-4 years ago during COVID. Because if you're a seller, imagine you're under contract and then you receive an offer for $50,000 more what you're under contract for. Like that, I'm not justifying it. I would never recommend a seller to try to back out of a contract, but that's where the sellers were getting the idea.
Right.
Now, a buyer can make a much stronger argument against a seller as far as what they can do. And a buyer can actually force a seller to sell the property. A buyer can have a judge force the seller to sign a deed to the property, selling the property to the buyer.
Interesting.
So you have a lot better of a leg to stand on as a buyer. And what the contract says is you don't have to go through any mediation. You don't have to get a mediator. You can sue when the seller defaults, and you can record something in the public records to make sure that seller doesn't sell the property to someone else.
Oh,
And we
wow.
call that a
Interesting.
specific performance lawsuit.
You imagine that drama? Like getting them out of the house and like, I can't.
Dragging them out.
Oh my gosh. They're like wrecking walls. They're like not flushing toilets. Like that place is going to be a mess.
Sabotage it. I mean, they agree that it's going to be in the same condition it was when they signed the contract, right? That's also in the contract. But I mean, could you blame a buyer for doing it if they fall in love with the property and then the seller decides they don't want to sell it, or if the buyer has the super good deal? I mean, even if you have to invest in attorney's fees, I think the case is there for a buyer. Absolutely.
Well, our clients, buyer or seller, they're betting on this for their life change. And that's the stress that I was under with this recent transaction is like your example, they had moved out. Had taken financial risks to leave the home, waiting for closing. They're literally sitting there waiting for their check in order to move on with their lives and crying and just stressed beyond belief because they didn't know if they were going to get totally screwed or if they were going to get paid, It's all working out.
I know.
Just so you know, it's all working out at this point.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, where's some wood, right? Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Okay. So one of the things that you are very well known for is also your estate planning and probate, correct?
Yes, we do a lot of estate planning, and then we also handle a lot of probate cases as well.
Well, and so I was shocked. I don't know how you haven't dealt with any probate cases.
I haven't.
That's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, you're in the waiting room. What is happening?
It's bound to come.
Like what is important when it comes to like probate and getting things ready? I mean, the thing I keep running into is people who own property not being prepared for what happens after they pass and the complications that arise for their heirs and their estate. They think a will is enough.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't even have a will, Nicole. So, I mean, if they're thinking a will's enough, at least they have something in place because
That's
a lot
true.
of times,
That's true.
a lot of times the plan is to have no plan.
Awesome.
The first thing I tell people is look, having an estate plan, I think there's a misconception that you have to have all this stuff. You have to have all these properties and businesses and all these assets in order to have a will or a trust or some type of an estate plan. But if you're a parent, and especially if you have minor children, you need to have an estate plan because if something happens to you or your partner or the other parent of your child, then who's going to take care of your kid? And you need to have an estate plan for your children. And that's because we all do it for family at the end of the day, and that's like number one priority. But once you start having assets and once you start owning properties, you definitely want to have a will or a trust in place. And the reason why is if you don't, then the state decides what happens to your stuff. And I can illustrate this perfectly by an example. I had a property. We were doing the probate for this property, and a person who lived here in Florida passed away, had no will in place, had no family here, was only really close to her neighbor, and she had 14 different heirs all spread throughout the UK.
Oh my God.
And her neighbor came to us and wanted help with this probate. And so because she had no will, the state was like, oh, these distant cousins all the way in the UK, they're entitled to the home.
Wow.
And so we went years trying to locate the heirs, trying to track them down, trying to get them to sign the documentation because we had no contact info. We didn't have anything. We didn't even know their names at first until we had to do this whole study on the family until we could find it out. In the meantime, what's happening to this home?
Wow. It's falling apart.
Hurricanes are hitting.
Yeah.
The roof's dilapidating. The value's going down. It's bogging down the prices for the neighborhood. Vandalism's happening. I mean, it's an absolute nightmare. So in that case, the person who passed away, she could have said, hey, I love dogs. I want to go donate to the Humane Society, or I went to this university. I want to donate and leave my inheritance to the university I went to. She could have had a say in where she went, but because there was no plan, it was very, very slow moving process that impacted way more people than I think she could have even imagined. Because when you start thinking about the neighborhood and how it decreases prices and everything, the impact it makes, that failure to have a plan is huge. So
So not to go down a rabbit hole, how
yeah.
long did it take to resolve this? Like, how many years did it take to resolve, and who paid your invoice, right? It sounded like the neighbor contacted you. And again, don't go down a rabbit hole. I don't want to spend 15 minutes on it. I'm just short answers. I'm just curious, like those 2 points.
Basically, we offer no money down probates. And so in certain situations like this, we'll start a probate when we know that there's a property involved. We'll help get the property sold, and we'll wait to get paid until the property is sold. And so because there was a house, we were able to do that. And so, yeah, the neighbor was helping getting the legwork done, and she was essentially serving as personal representative. It was actually a curator in this sense. But I think it took 2.5, 3 years, Jeremy, in totality to get this resolved, where it should have taken 6 months.
Right. And it would have been a lot less expensive for that family that eventually inherited something out of it, because they had to pay you at the end of 2.5 years doing a lot of hourly work, right? I'm not sure how that works, but it would have been a lot less expensive just to take care of this all up front. Probably one flat fee. Yeah, we'll do the whole estate planning for you. Instead, it ended up being probably, oh gosh, I can't imagine how many hours of work, and then it comes out at the end. So, I mean, and
they're complicated. I had one for sale, and of course the properties are usually lower value. So it was like under 200 in Palm Bay. There were 5 heirs and 1 personal representative. So, and 3 of them wouldn't talk to 2 of them. So I'd have to call all of them separately.
Oh my gosh.
It was a nightmare. And that property, hole in the roof, like leaking. It was fantastic. So good.
Wow.
So I tell anybody, it's like, if the property you're looking at when you go to make an offer, or even if you're trying to sell it, make sure that you have the authority, and you don't have to go through this probate, or you don't need to get something from the trust, or there's no steps that are required to be completed before you go try to buy or sell the property. Try to find out it from the beginning. And you can do that by just asking simple questions and looking at the deed on the public records to see who owns the property. If you're dealing with someone else that's not on the deed, then you should be asking, well, where is this person? Oh, well, they passed away.
Well, even on a trust that I had, title work ahead of time will save you a ton of work too. Like that's a lesson learned. Even though it was in a trust, we were good to go. Nope. The title work was not in line. So then what is one thing you wish every seller knew before they even listed the property?
I wish every seller would get a title search before they list the property.
Oh yeah. You had me do that when I sold my house in Sebastian.
Yeah. I feel like if every seller would get a title search before they sell the property, then and we'll do it. I mean, we won't even charge anything to do it if they're going to actually list the property. Then we can find out about issues and resolve issues before we have a buyer, before we've got a closing date in mind, and we can provide a much smoother process to get the property closed.
That's awesome.
Apart from that, I would say the only other thing, if I could give one more piece of advice,
please,
is if you're a seller, it's better to disclose something that's wrong with the home than not disclose it. Have you guys ever had a transaction where there was some type of failure to disclose?
I've had closings that occurred where within 24 hours of closing, the entire flooring underneath the LPV was flooded. They closed, they went the next day, started walking around, and it was squish, 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 squish. And we did a walkthrough, and it wasn't like that. And so it's debatable if the seller knew there was an issue of flooding because of rain or whatever. Like, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's always close.
I had a similar type. I had something not quite 24 hours. It was like a week later, but a similar issue that came out of a transaction. And then the hilarious part is the buyer ended up calling a plumbing company to come out and look at it. And the plumbing company goes, "Oh, I was here 3 months ago, and I gave an estimate to
No,
fix the problem."
no.
Wow. Wow.
Slam
Open and
dunk as
shut
far as a
case.
case, because the law in Florida is you have an obligation to disclose no matter what's in the contract. You have an obligation to disclose something that affects the value of the property that you can't see by just walking around the house, that you can't see by a visible inspection. So if
Wow.
something happens when it rains, right, and every time you were at the property as a buyer it wasn't
Mhm.
raining, that's something that you're not going to be able to visibly see unless there's marks in the
Yellowing or
ceiling
staining.
for,
Yeah.
yeah, unless there's like some type of staining. But if there's no staining, or some type of like septic issue in the front yard that happens only when it rains, that about as a seller, you need to
Mhm.
disclose those issues. Otherwise, in the example that I gave, that seller ended up paying money because they were clearly in the wrong. They clearly hid that problem from the buyer, and you can't do that in residential real estate in the
Wow.
state of Florida.
No, I've had like buyers come back and try to ask questions about a property that the seller didn't know about.
Mhm.
Like they never even lived in it. There's like, why is there flooding in the backyard? They're like, I have no idea. I never lived there.
Yeah.
I was never there
Yeah.
when it rained,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing has ever come to fruition. Thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Better that way.
I know. I don't want it. I have enough drama.
Gotcha.
That kind of answered our last question.
Yeah.
Because we were like, what is one piece of advice to give a first-time seller listening? And that was title search and disclosures. Is there
Absolutely.
anything else people need to know? There's probably a ton, but
I can't think of it. I think I gave all the
Sound
advice I needed to.
No, Jordan, I mean, you've been an awesome guest. We're definitely going to ask to have you back on in different situations.
Yeah.
Full of knowledge. Yeah.
he helps out a
Yeah.
lot. Like he's hopefully going to help a developer of mine do his like form an HOA. So like
Cool.
these random things you don't think about, like
Yeah.
where do HOAs come from?
That's right. They come from Jordan.
They come from Jordan. Jordan is the
One of the 25,000 that have popped up in the condo
he
association.
births them.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. Quite the scene.
So
Yeah.
the image, you
Yeah.
like that imagery?
Don't want that
Nice.
image. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. And if anybody wants to reach out, you can find me at www.lulich.com or give us a call at 772-589-5.
Okay. That's a wrap on another episode of $1 Million Failure. Big thanks to Jordan for opening up and sharing his advice and expertise.
Yeah. If you ever had a home that didn't sell and want to share your story, whether you're looking for advice, a second shot, or just need to vent, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at milliondollarfailures@gmail.com.
And if you're planning to sell and want to get it right the first time, we're here to help. Just reach out.
Huge shout out to Jeffrey French at Grit and Grind Studios for making us sound good every week.
And if you like today's episode, hit all the buttons, like, subscribe, follow, and share. Please, please leave us a review wherever you're listening and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Threads for new episodes and also some behind the scenes content. We've got little clips that pop up.
And hey, if you're a brand or business that wants to sponsor the show, let's talk.
Thanks for tuning in.
Until next time,
I'm Nicole.
and I'm Jeremy.